Blue Mind is a platform to raise consciousness and to elevate your performance and develop your physical and emotional health. We interview experts in mind and body, writers, sports people, entrepreneurs, and those with an inspiring story to tell to help us all raise our performance to the next level. So welcome to Blue Mind. Hello, so welcome to another edition of the Blue Mind podcast with Mark, and tonight we're joined by Emma Pritchard from Dorset. We're going to have a good conversation about what Emma is up to. Hello, everybody, all our 66 subscribers. It's great to have you here, and it's the 6th podcast I think we've done this year, maybe 7. So we've got a bit of momentum. Emma, welcome. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Thank you, Edward and Mark. Thanks for inviting me along today.
Great stuff. And by way of introduction, Emma is an accredited counsellor based down in Dorset, does a lot of teaching out of various educational establishments down there, and is also a forest bathing expert, which I believe in Japanese is Shinrin Roku. Is that correct?
Shinrin Yoku.
Shinrin Yoku.
Nearly. Yeah, nearly.
So we've invited Emma on today to talk about the benefits of nature, the benefits of counselling, and hopefully we'll touch on some more masculine and male aspects of that. Emma has also got 2 sons, and I'm sure you have a lot of boys and young men in your counselling and in your coaching courses. So we'll get onto that later. And I've got my notifications pinging, so let me just try and turn that off. Welcome, Emma. So how's the forest today? Have you been in it?
I haven't been. I'm sorry to disappoint you. I haven't been in today, but I do go in most days. I work in a local woods. I don't know whether you can remember Thomas Hardy, or you're aware of Thomas Hardy, but I actually work in Thomas Hardy Woods. So it's a really beautiful kind of what I call very historic, sacred land, and I'm just so lucky to work in there. And I've been working in there since about 2017.
Right. So who is Emma Pritchard? Let's hear about the genesis of how you ended up doing this amazing stuff. I think you're known as a bit of an expert, certainly in Dorset and maybe nationally, in terms of this practice. So how did you get there? And was it a conscious decision from an earlier age?
Well, about 10 years ago, I've got 3 children, like you mentioned. I've got 2 boys and a girl. And 3 years ago, I really reassessed where I wanted to be in my life. I think when I did my original degree, I did a degree in psychology. But I'd never really expanded that. I'd kind of moved into a very fast-paced kind of retail environment, working in a lot of cities. So when I moved to Dorset, the children, I think the youngest was just being born actually, I really sat with the Dorset countryside and thought, what is it that I really want to do next? So I went back to those original thoughts about psychology and thought, actually, I'd quite like to retrain in child counselling or something. So I just started a very kind of creative counselling course with an amazing counselling college where I actually study, I lecture now, and was just so inspired to sort of be back in that learning environment, and then did the diploma. And alongside that, when you're counselling, you get to do a lot of kind of volunteering. And I ended up working a lot in bereavement charities. It's like quite serendipity, really. That's how it worked for me. And within that work, obviously, when you're working with grief in young children or adults, it's big feelings. We're talking really big feelings. And when I first started, I was going into people's homes, shortly after they'd lost loved ones. And I was very aware of like the energy of what that environment felt like. It just felt so, imagery. I'm talking dark, very sort of sticky. People get very stuck in that place. People would say to me things like, before my uncle died, I really used to like walking in the woods and things. So I started seeing these really familiar themes coming up, and I just happened to think, I wonder what it'd be like if I set up a bereavement group in the woods, because I really love nature. Okay. And it just worked. I went to speak to the rangers at the woods. They'd had a wellbeing grant. They said, yes, please come. So that's how I started. I used to just go out with this group of people, very sort of like from a heart sense, this feels right. Let's walk through this grief. Let's unstick it, because grief is a very sticky, it gets embodied in our bodies, and let's see if we can kind of move through the process. So it's very instinctive to start with. And then I started to think with my counselling hat, thinking, well, I'm working under this professional organisation, the British.
Emma, one second to interrupt you. Is it possible to put your laptop on a table or something? Because
is it moving?
It's moving quite
Is
a bit.
it? Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll hold it because I do move when I'm talking, so I'll hold it.
Yeah, I can pause and edit that bit out, but
Okay, I'll hold it because I do move my hands. I'll be conscious of that. Thank you.
Sorry to be a pedantic, but it was just looking a bit like you were on a boat.
Like wobbly.
Yeah. Carry on.
So where was I?
Instinctive.
Yeah, instinctive. So I thought I must really check out whether this is okay. I'm taking these clients outside into these woods. I found an amazing course based in Dartmoor with a guy called Stefan Baratouris. He's got Nature and Therapy UK, and I trained as a certified forest therapist and then integrated all my practice. So since about 2018, I've worked mainly outside, but very much inspired by a statistic that came out in 2016, which was 75% of our children spend less time outdoors than prisoners. And it just really hit me because I grew up in Staffordshire. I was always outside, had this amazing connection with nature, which I didn't actually realise, because when I was working in cities, I came actually a bit disconnected from nature at that time. It wasn't until I moved to Dorset, that I kind of thought, nature's a really wonderful place. And then I started to appreciate those more maybe sort of energetic, spiritual healing properties that nature can offer, as well as scientific and physical benefits, etc., that we all know about. So this is where I am today. So I have, when I first started doing this, I was really working intuitively, and now I go out to lots of schools. I work in school gardens, and I work with, like I say, about I'm trying to think, probably about 30 children a week under 10 who are struggling with different mental health.
Is this one-on-one coaching or group? Is this group?
A mixture, group and groups.
And how do they? Who finds you? Is it done through schools or is it done through parents, or how is this being sort of developed?
It's really developed like word. I'm quite lucky. It's word of mouth actually, but I have spent a lot of time building relationships with schools, because at the end of the day, the children go into these schools, between 9 and 3, and so my role has been a lot of this. However long it is now, 6 or 7 years, has been building these relationships with schools, building relationship with parents, and actually normalizing difficulties and feelings and thoughts, and allowing children a space to come out of their school environments. I'd probably say like 75% of my children have neurodiversity, so normalizing this, ADHD, autism, and the outdoor space is such a wonderful space for young people to actually express their senses rather than suppress, which is what happens when they're in like a more of a clinical environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you talk? Question from me. I and many people will assume that it's good to be in nature. But I think that's an assumption that's possibly not that accurate. So why is being in nature good for the nervous system, good for a human being, and how often would you recommend it, and what kind of duration would you suggest people do?
Okay, well, there's I don't know whether you've heard of the biophilia hypothesis, which is where every human being has an innate need to be connected to nature. So that's the first reason. We have an innate, like there's something within our kind of DNA that knows that connecting to nature is a really positive thing for us somewhere back historically. Within the Shinrin-yoku research that was only really done in the 1980s, and there was an amazing doctor there, Dr. Lee, who stopped prescribing antidepressants medication and started to prescribe these lovely forest walks. And what they did is they measured people's cortisol levels, blood pressure, to just see whether they had an improvement from being in a forest. The Japanese forests have the most amazing sort of eucalyptus smells. It's really beautiful. So what they found is that cortisol levels dropped, blood pressure dropped, But this is really relatively new research. I mean, we're talking the 1980s, where in Japan, the technology was probably where our technology is now, where people were very eye dominated. And the idea was of just going into nature, slowing down, connecting to your other senses, take you away from your eyes. And actually, that's where the improvement comes. So there is that from a research point of view, but also what it does is the latest research actually is, I don't know whether you've heard of EMDR, which is the eye desensitization movement for to support PTSD.
Yes, a little bit. I've heard the EMDR anagram.
Well, the latest research shows that actually if you're walking and talking, your eyes are moving, and so it helps you to reduce the threat and the threat that comes from your amygdala. So what it does is when you're walking and talking, difficult emotions, your amygdala will just suppress down, so it's not in a place of threat. So it actually works really well for kind of helping people to process difficult emotions. So from a psychological place, it's a really positive thing to do. It improves creativity, productivity. So, like if you've got loads of work to do, you can procrastinate all you like. But if you actually go, I'm going to go and do that hour walk, what will happen is your parasympathetic system will relax down. Your amygdala will relax, your mind will clear, and you will then be able to come back and have a clarity of thought, be more creative, be more productive. So what I find when I'm working with children and adults is that when they are able to process these emotions in an outdoor space, you find that they'll say things to you like, oh, I couldn't concentrate in my English lesson, or I couldn't concentrate in maths, but they suddenly are able to sort of, their marks go up. So from a school place, it just makes sense, just give children sort of an hour or so outside, but being mindful, and they're going to go back indoors and they're going to feel calmer. They're going to feel like they can actually do their work better.
Does it have to be in natural surroundings, or could it be in a playground?
Can be anywhere where there's kind of something natural to kind of observe and be. So if, for example, a school sometimes have sensory gardens where they've got, I'm just trying to think, all different things for the children to sort of engage within the garden.
So is it green? Is it people you have to see?
Yeah, green spaces. Yeah, so London, any cities where there's like a green space. If you go out, so I think it's something like if you're 2 hours in nature a week, you get the benefits of all the microbiomes into your system, and that will actually give you those like mental health and physical benefits for a month. So blood pressure. I think it also supports things like diabetes. I think being outside increases things like your NK cells, which are linked to cancer. So there's lots of reasons. If you've been ill and you're repairing from an operation, go outside into nature.
Can you talk about the microbiomes a little bit? What that could be?
The microbiomes are just everything that's outside. So this from the soil, or the air that you're breathing in the natural environment. If you're in a forest.
Wow. Golly. So what is there any truth in the tree hugging concept? Because that's of course what a lot of people, I think when we talked about this 8 years ago, that was my standard idiotic response to what you were doing. So what is there a benefit of hugging a tree?
Have you hugged a tree?
Yes, more so recently than 8 years ago.
Yeah. And do you find a benefit when you hug a tree?
Great. I love the way you put that back on me. Yes, I do. I feel attached in a weird way to explain, but I do sense there's a more of a connection there, which I've chosen to see. Yeah.
So trees have the most amazing energetic forces. So I don't, we've talked about a bit about the physical, we've talked about the psychological, but we're also talking about that energy as well. And trees have an energetic field of about 30 meters. So you can stand in that and actually feel very connected. But all I'll say is when I work with children, especially because they obviously are younger than me and they're younger than their parents, when they lean against a tree, they naturally almost like close their eyes. It's almost like they're just, oh, I'm connected here. This is what we do. We lean against a tree and I feel relaxed.
Wow. And what do they have a radius of 30 meters of? Is there an energy there coming from that tree, or
it's
is
just
it
like the tree? Yeah, the tree energy.
Yeah, because I noticed a really interesting video of someone had gone, I think whether it was infrared or something else. They actually showed over a period of several days filming the tree that the tree is alive, and there's obviously water and stuff flowing up it, and carbohydrate and everything else, and starch flowing down through the photosynthesis. And the tree, it's amazing to see that the tree is a breathing organism. It's incredible. I'll try and find that video. It's very interesting.
And on that as well, like obviously that we're you know, if you're thinking about the people that are watching this, you know, I'm assuming it's mainly male.
It is, yes. You assume
audience.
correct.
The California redwood trees are they support kind of like gentle masculine energy. So anybody who's feeling a little bit kind of uptight, a bit anxious, maybe a bit angry, go and find a California redwood tree.
Right. Mark, when's the last time you hugged a tree, mate, bro?
While I was listening at it, a picture came to mind of when you and I went on a walk and had a little tree hug.
Yes.
I think we did. Yeah, we had a similar conversation, and you initially ignited that conversation, and you were explaining a similar thing to me, and as potentially crazy as this sounds, I can remember reaching out, touching the bark, holding onto the tree, and this idea of it breathing and life is quite extraordinary. And I'm not ashamed to admit it at all, but I'd say since that, every time I go for a walk, I will embrace a tree. I don't hug the tree, but I will touch the tree and consciously think of it breathing and creating energy. And I think there's something wonderful about that.
Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful. This is truly a fascinating conversation, right? Because I'm somebody who I really like the idea of grounding, for example, right? So I like to go on walks. I can understand, I can feel the benefits. If I go for a walk barefoot, I feel different afterwards. So for me, this is really interesting now to dig a little bit deeper into the nuance around what specifically is happening during a session, for example. So Emma, if you wouldn't mind describing or telling us more in terms of what you would expect from a session, because I'm generalizing here, but for the majority, I've heard the benefit of children going out and walking, etc. But I would say most people will be listening to this go, well, surely the advice is just go out and walk outside for an hour, and you know what, is that it? But actually, I would really like to understand the detail and the idea of you said a specific word which I thought was brilliant, but this whole idea of just imagine it's a process of connecting with your breath and specifically looking at something with intent while feeling present, if that makes sense.
So sort of being very mindful. So I integrate lots of different things into my practice because I bring the counselling element. So I work a lot with Gestalt, for anybody who knows that. I work with TA, transactional analysis. But I think the whole element of going outside is really so individual and so unique. So I'm going to have some clients that are turning up, and this might resonate with you as well. A lot of people nowadays are sort of in their heads, thinking about things all the time, doing. There's a model called, it's by Paul Gilbert. It's like the compassionate model, which is that a third of our brain is always driving, and that is obviously a very thinking place to be. But saying he says that a third of our brain should be doing that. But I think when a lot of my clients turn up, they're probably sitting in that a lot more than a third. So a lot of people come thinking. A lot of people contact me and say, I really like being outdoors. I like walking the dog. I take the children out. But this is about actually slowing down. If you watch Dr. Lai doing some of his sort of like showing how it goes, it's very, very kind of almost like slow, meditative movements in nature. You know, actually, if you've got a pine tree, for example, like you just talked about, connecting to the pine and smelling it, and being kind of really grateful for that experience. So the final part of the practice when you're actually outside in nature is to be grateful. So I think most people will come to the sessions in their what we'll call their headspace. Now, what happens when we actually connect, whether that's to a person, an animal, or nature, is we're going more into our heart spaces. So this is about creating what I call like a balance for us to actually reconnect, not just to our heart spaces, but to our like bodies as well. And obviously you asked about, I think, how does it work with children? Again, every assessment's unique. For children nowadays, you know, you'll know 1 in 4 young person, whether they're male or female, is affected by mental health, and that can be anything from anxiety, suicidal thoughts, depression, and so they're coming with different things. So obviously when you're working with something like anxiety, when we're very anxious, we disconnect from our senses. So we disconnect from our, you know, like I say, we're very eye dominated as a society. We disconnect from all our other senses: touch, smell, you know, taste. So when you're in the forest, it's a really amazing place to actually really connect to all your senses. So when I'm working with neurodiversity, you know, those children, for example, who in a clinical space might feel like some neurodiverse children have an amazing spatial awareness. So they feel like everyone's looking at them, or if they do something wrong, when they're in nature, they can actually like see the smallest things and actually feel very curious and let those senses come to life.
Yeah,
so I don't know whether that's answered your question.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, there's a degree of playfulness as well here, isn't there, in terms of sensory attachment for children and adults, presumably, because the woodlands are playful by definition.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Ed. So what I was thinking about when I was thinking about who I might be talking to on this today is that when we get into sort of like I'm in my middle age, then, you know, we still have a child within us that still needs to be connected and curious. It doesn't really matter how old we are. And being outside is a perfect way of doing that. You know, I very often see clients, you know, they start kicking through the leaves and, you know, and that, you know, as an adult. But the other thing that happens from a subconscious place is we can connect to our memories of things. So it helps us to feel really integrated again. So if we've been a bit disconnected from, you know, memories of loved ones or places that we used to like to be, then it allows us to kind of integrate ourselves back. So it really supports sort of our identity, who we are, increases confidence.
Do you know what the science is behind that? Why is that specific? I mean, obviously sitting in a house, is it because of the nervous system and how the body reacts to being in open space or around?
What, the memories?
Yeah, the memories. What do you know? What the science? Just the memory recall, or is
it? Thinking about like when you're out and about walking, say seasonally. I don't know about you, but for me, if I see sort of bluebells, for example, because they've just been in the woods, then I might be taken back to a place where I've like been with somebody that I love or care about, that we have that experience. So just being in the environment can actually, symbols and imagery in the woods. I don't know whether you know, a lot of people, if they see a robin, might say that that they feel like that's somebody like that's died that they loved, and they might say, oh, you know, oh, I think my uncle's here today. So it helps people to attach to, you know, lots of things, you know, people, memories.
Yes, well, that's understandable. So clearly there's a lot of benefits physiologically, emotionally, spiritually, and I mean, personally speaking, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I always tell myself to go for a walk, preferably in Cannock Chase or around a wood. And gosh, without fail, I feel better at the end of that walk than I did at the start of it. Mark is a big walker, and I think during lockdown we spent most of our time walking around a field. He can speak for himself, but I think going out in the morning, when's the best time of day? Because I think we have a belief that if you go out in the morning, you're getting additional benefits from UV rays and additional benefit of that. Is there a time you'd recommend for the body clock and the natural sort of sleep patterns?
I think it's just based on your, like, if you're able to go earlier, then go earlier. I think it's all on your uniques. I think it doesn't really matter as long as you go out, as far as I would see.
Right.
I think I always think it's the hardest thing for people when they're feeling really demotivated about going out for a walk, because some people will say, well, I don't want to go out when it's raining, is actually getting ready to go out. So that, like, when you're feeling really demotivated, I've got to get my boots on. It's that whole cycle. You can procrastinate about going for a walk, probably, for,
like
so
exercise though, is just get up and get it done. I mean, I think maybe if you obviously a lot of people have dogs now. Dog craze went nuts during COVID. I can see why people do that for exercise, community, gets you out of the house. I mean, there's huge benefits of having to walk a dog every day. It forces you to get into nature, or indeed down the end of the cul-de-sac and back. But at least it gets you outside and exercising. So really, what you're saying is it doesn't matter how long and when you go and where you go, as long as you're activating the nervous system and putting yourself in an environment in a natural situation.
I think it's just being, if you haven't walked for if you haven't done this for ages, I mean, I'm talking about it, I do it all the time now because I've been doing it for so long, or practicing mindful connection. If you haven't even gone out for a walk for ages, I think it's just about thinking about, well, have I got the right boots? Where would I want to walk? How long have I got? Can I even just park the car, 20 minutes from my office and do that walk?
Yeah.
I think it's about just looking at your routine and thinking, what could I do to add that in?
Yeah. I mean, just further for me, I mean, I remember during lockdown, I would pause in the middle of the trees, and I remember doing this with Lily a lot, and I would just stand still and take several deep breaths and look up at the sky. And it was just a really nice thing to do with her and on my own. And I think it really puts you in a very balanced place. If you, even when it's raining, standing in a forest or a woodland, I don't know, there's something really, really cathartic about it, and it really grounds you. Being barefoot would be even better. I mean, we do some grounding, and there's a lot of benefits of being in touch with the earth. I think there's an ionization that occurs as well, and there's prescribed benefits of sort of arthritis and blood pressure of actually walking with no shoes on. So I guess for people listening, the general thing is that everyone, I think, with any sense would believe and concur that going for a walk in nature is a good thing. And I think you've explained some of the science, Emma, as to why it is. So that's a massive tick. So I think for people watching, get outside as often as you can every day. Long walks at the weekend. I don't think there's any detriment to going out at the weekend rather than during the week if you're working. And with the kids as well, right? It's a great thing to do with the family, gets the children out there, and it's obviously good for mental health and processing and everything else. So that fantastic. Sounds great. I mean, just on that, where can people find you on your practice if they've got questions before we move on to something else?
So they can literally just put in Emma Pritchard and I'll come up in Dorchester. So
related to work or some other kind of content.
So if Dorchester Counselling and Wellbeing is my business name.
Great.
Yeah.
Mark, have you got any more points, or you want to talk about that aspect of what Emma's doing? I think we're going to move on to more sort of the counselling and young men, I think, which I'd like to use your expertise, because we have our Blue Mind is about prevention and proactive behaviour, so we can have a talk about that. Any more from you, Mark, on trees and forests and Shinrin Roku? Said wrongly.
It sounds like, well, Roku. I'm pretty sure Roku is 8 in Japanese. Yoku it is, Ed.
Yoku.
That's right.
Yeah, Yoku.
Sorry, I'm 50 now. I can't remember basic words.
It sounds like a number of things are working, and you wouldn't change it. But over the years, having done this for a number of years now, what do you feel is not working, and you might have to change? Because I can imagine it's an ever evolving process, and you're learning either new insight, whether it be from your own experience or mentors, etc.
I mean, because I'm also a mentor actually for a lot of trainee kind of forest therapists, and there's a lot going on around the UK that is incredible, all outdoors to support mental health. I think for me personally, I feel like at the moment, the forest where I'm working, I do a lot of kind of gratitude in that forest, for myself or anybody that's coming in, clients. I think I would in Dorset, there's a lot of kind of farming families. There's a lot of, the fire service, police service that, I don't think would engage with counselling unless they came to an outdoor practice. So I think what I would change is just, I'm a lecturer teaching this as well, is that I could actually just reach more people and get them to feel confident and competent to go outside and work outside with their clients, because that can sometimes be something that stops people doing it. So I think if I could just support more people, really train more people to do what I do in the wood I work in.
Amazing. Ed, over to you and a change of topic. It sounds like. What would you like to learn more about?
Well, I would like to talk to Emma about counselling, and I'm a massive fan of counselling. I'm currently undergoing some counselling because I try and do it every few years when I feel I need to challenge myself and I've got some blockages. So I'd like to give a big shout out to counselling for people who are suffering from any kind of challenges. And I think, yes, it's nice to believe you can sort it out yourself, but I would always suggest to people to go for some therapy and counselling. So I'd like to get your candid view on that and give a very personal opinion as to why people should try it. I think Mark and I are pretty supportive of the concept. And then we can move on to getting your thoughts about if you've got young boys, which is very topical. If you're a mum or a dad, let's talk about that a little bit and recognize disruptive emotions and how to talk to young boys. I mean, again, we're not gender specific particularly, but let's try and break patterns. So let's talk about counselling and therapy. If you're unsure about going to counselling and you think it's for people who are depressed or mentally ill or, whatever, what would your response to that be? Because I had that opinion 20 years ago. I'd never go to therapy. Why do I need to go to therapy?
I think, I'm going to go back to the middle age. I think very often what happens is we all find strategies, whether we're female, male, gender, whatever gender, find strategies throughout our lifetime that we feel are the right ones for us. But I think what can happen is when life events snowball. So if you think about like lifelines of 50, there's possibly going to be 2 or 3 quite traumatic events, I would have thought, that's happened through that time. We can't keep up with those normal coping strategies. So I think this is where we need to normalise support. There's so much support out there in the community, although I know there's a lot of waiting lists and things like that people are hearing about. But if you think about a family system, you've got parents working long hours in a clinical environment, mainly. I'm going to talk about these clinical environments because I actually worked in one for a year last year. Right. And I felt myself getting really ill. I'm sort of physically ill, feeling very psychologically ill from being in like this kind of what I call clinical artificial lighting. So we've got family systems where we've got parents working in these environments. We've got children in schools or not in schools, because there's a lot of children that aren't able to attend school at the moment due to sort of mental health. And if you think about all of those people coming into the house, think about all the emotions that they're all holding, that it is occasionally quite normal to have a quite chaotic system of lots of deregulation that happens. And I think a lot of families nowadays find that really difficult to kind of keep what I call a very regulated environment. So I think in the, even when I grew up, I had 3 generations of family that lived in the same village, grandparents, aunties, great grandmas that talk about, bringing up a child being brought up by a village. I don't think we have that nowadays. So I think counselling support is like an extension of that, to support the mum, support dad, with whatever's going on for them, so they can be the best version of themselves for their young children, and regulate themselves so they can then be more able to regulate their young children when they come back from school having a kind of a meltdown or tantrum about something. So just normalizing support. It's normal. We should all have a space that is able for us to just talk about our feelings and thoughts.
Mark, do you want to jump in? I've got a couple of points I'd like to.
You go first, bud.
Yeah. So the way that I look at counselling is that when I I don't want to dump. I often think that it's not, people say, well, talk to people, if you're feeling anguish and overwhelmed and sadness, talk to your friends and family, talk to your partner, talk to your parents, talk to your kids, if they're old enough and mature enough. But I think, why do I want to dump all that on other people? Everyone's got their own challenges. And a therapist to me is a consciously self-aware of not dumping my stuff on people I love, but resolving it in my own mind and head. I give myself the space, which I pay for someone to listen to me. Now, look, who doesn't like talking about themselves for an hour? It doesn't happen in the world, really, does it? And it's not about ego. It's about giving yourself the time to process your thoughts, and having a professional who will listen to you, who will provide some really insightful commentary and suggestions, and ask the right questions at the right times for you to move forward in your thinking about a topic that's causing you. So that's how I justify it. That's why I think it's beneficial. And I actually go habitually to be proactive, even when I'm not in a distressed state, or even when I'm in a positive state. I will think, oh, I should go because I think that's going to be helpful to stay on top of things. So that's how I invest in it. And I'm very conscious that not everybody can afford it. I think the pricing is anywhere between 60 and hundreds of pounds an hour, depending on who you're going to. And obviously availability of therapists is really, we hear a lot about it on the news. It's very difficult to get therapy for children through the CAM system, I believe. I hear some
I think there's 250,000 of children waiting for CAMS referral at the moment.
Yeah, and it is a national crisis would be reasonable words to use, that children, that's 250,000 kids who have been recommended to go to counselling, who are not getting that space to express themselves. Now, that also says to me, well, there's something broken in society that we're even in this situation, and that's a very long discussion to have compared to 20, 30 years ago, where this would not even probably be a conversation for different reasons. So I think if you're in a situation where you're going, well, that's all very well good and good, but we can't find a therapist, we can't afford a therapist, and we know that our children need therapy. I mean, what would we say to those people if you know you want to do it, but you can't access it for yourself or for your children?
So, if depending on what your presentation is, always go to your GP. And I'm going to say people really are resistant to going to see their GP. Right. And I don't know exactly the percentages off the top of my head right now, but I probably 1 in 3 people I see, the first thing I'm going to say is, please will you go and see your GP.
Okay.
That's for all different reasons. I think it is quite difficult for whichever gender to go into a GP and admit that you're struggling with something. But the things that you definitely go to the GP if you're having panic attacks, definitely go to the GP if you're presenting with suicidal thoughts, self-harm. They're the clinical professions that are there to support that. Now, obviously, like you said, counsellors are there to sort of support processing of like stories or difficult events that have happened. But very often I'm working alongside what I call like multi-agencies. So if you're a family and you're feeling in a crisis, there are some amazing support groups there's in Dorset, the Early Help. And the Early Help kind of have, so that the family might be referred to them. They will have a worker, and they will look at the family and talk to all the family members and see what we need. Within schools, if you can't afford to have counselling for children, there are the NHS has a children programme that you may be lucky to get children on. But there's also the emotional literacy support in schools, which is actually really good. They're called ELSAs, and the ELSAs are really well trained with just helping children to talk about feelings. So
these are trained people within the school teachers.
Within schools, school
Brilliant.
Environments. So I think sometimes it's about knowing this information, so you know what to say. Yeah. If you say, can my child have ELSA? I mean, obviously there's limited funding. I think some children will just sort of have 6 sessions, but that is the kind of normal for funded counselling sessions now, sort of 6 to 8 sessions.
Why do you think, bluntly, people struggle to walk into a GP and say, I'm struggling? Is it the same reasons they struggle to say that to people they know?
I think it's go back to that the Paul Gilbert model, that driver we have a driver, there's an innate driver to like, I can sort this out myself, I can do this myself. And actually, you know, the GPs, I think it's 50% of the people they will see now is not just physical health, it's mental health. So it's just to normalise it. It's a really normal, if you ring the NHS 111, they'll say, is this a mental health condition or a physical health condition? So let's just normalise this.
Yes,
it's absolutely okay to go to your GP, and I won't work with anybody unless if they haven't been to the GP, because I feel like really strongly that you need to just normalise and start some medication if you need to. You know, be referred to the right people.
Well, I love that advice, and I think it's really powerful. And I think that Mark and I talk a lot about prevention, about diet, about sleep, about nutrition, about, you know, exercise, daily movement, and about, you know, trying to speak truthfully and not self-sabotaging drugs, alcohol, and, you know, so we often think, let's try and do the basics first, do the basics well. Talk to your people around you that you trust, reach out to people that you want to confide in. And if you're still feeling rubbish, please go to the doctors.
If you have
ask for help from clinical and medical professionals.
So if you've got a low mood for 2 weeks, you must go to your GP.
Brilliant advice. I don't know why I haven't heard that before.
But I really love what you said there, because I would rather someone came to me and said, I've for 2 weeks, I've drank loads of water, I've eaten healthily, I've exercised, but my mood is still low. So we can go, okay, the next step, go to the GP. You know, because a lot of the way I start sessions is about self-care. Are you sleeping? You know, are you eating well? You know, the Maslow hierarchy of needs, you know, all of those basics. So I think it's great support that you're giving to your you know, subscribers, because that is really important. But 2 weeks, if you've been in a low mood, GP.
That's really helpful, and hopefully it encourages a few people to take that step if they're doubtful, and have confidence in the GP. And there's some amazing GPs. The NHS is incredible, and seek out some. In terms of finding a counsellor, there's a number of directories you can Google. There's the Association of British Psychologists, I think. Is there another one?
It's the counselling directory. You'll get counsellors that are accredited, with quite specialised. The BACP, which is the British Association for Counsellors and Psychotherapists,
that's the one,
they will also have the accredited counsellors. So what you're looking for is somebody who is an accredited counsellor that has got kind of been trained in the right kind of educational environment.
So just to be clear for people, and if you feel this could be something for you, and it should be, I believe, again, but make your own mind up and do some research. Find someone locally. Obviously, a lot of therapists, counsellors work online. They will typically give you a half an hour call. They'll describe why you think you need to see a therapist, and then they will suggest if they're a suitable personage to be your therapist. Then you will have a first session, which is usually an hour. And after that, most of it is relationship based. So if you don't feel you warm to that counsellor and vice versa, you can then move on and try somebody else. So it's not like you're signing up for 6, 10, 12 weeks with one person. There has to be a working relationship there. And I think people maybe are a bit intimidated that they're sort of signing themselves up to something and they're not sure about why they're going. And again, you can get to the bottom of why you think you might need to be there once you're there. You don't have to go in with, I've got these problems and I want to sort them out. It can be just a feeling that something is off, right? That you feel different, you don't feel well in yourself. So check out those directories, call some people up, send them a message. They will call you. You can have a very informal, confidential conversation and work out if there's somebody that you relate to and connect with, and then you can decide to go for a session and then take it from there. And it is very much worth exploring if you're a bit stuck, I think. So Mark, do you want to add anything on that, on therapy, counselling, or are you happy with what we've landed at?
I'd like to acknowledge your efforts, Ed, to proactively go and speak to a professional. I think that's amazing, because there's a large degree of empathy there towards your loved ones, that you would prefer to take ownership and solve it without putting the burden of potentially your mental chatter and negative self-talk on others. So there's definitely something incredible about that.
Thanks.
It's important to my experience of therapy.
Can I just interrupt? I'll be completely transparent to maybe help anyone. I went because at age 50 I hit a bit of a kind of, what do I want for the next stage of my life, and I was bouncing around with all these feelings about what should I be doing at 50. Where should I be? What kind of work should I be doing? My kids have now are leaving home, and I was just stuck ruminating about what does this mean. And I was recognizing it was becoming like a bit of a constant thought process. And it wasn't like I was sad or depressed about it. I just couldn't I couldn't move forward with it. So I went to try and get some clarity on what is my purpose, and where do I think I'll be happiest, and why am I feeling a bit angsty about that. So that's the context, and hopefully that's helpful for people to, that is not what people would consider to be a serious issue in many ways. I don't feel suicidal, I'm not depressed, I'm fairly high functioning and positive, but it's still a problem. I'm not moving forward with it, and I think I needed some help. So anyway, sorry, Mark, I just wanted to offer that up.
No, thanks for sharing. I feel that's very much in line with what Emma was saying about a third of the brain and being stuck in this murky water sometimes, where we're just thought upon thought upon thought, and then when you're stuck in it, it's a very challenging place to for the water. Actually, once you realize that you just let the thoughts settle, and then innate intelligence will come through. It's that's an element of consciousness to be aware of. I'm not the right person to talk to about views or perception on therapy, because I potentially hold a negative bias based on an experience, a personal experience from couples counselling, where I felt that I want to avoid generalising. I speak openly about the experience of couples therapy, where I felt that the service was very much financially driven, and it was predictable in terms of the line of questioning and the sell. And I was just like, oh, hang on a minute, I've been in sales for 10 years. This doesn't work for me. It's not very personal. And I think that I'm not sure who said it, one of you said it, but this is very much a collaboration if you find the right person. Yeah. It's about them asking you. This is about questions. This is just about questions. Ask good questions, questions that will challenge you, that will encourage you to think a little bit deeper, not generic answers or questions that they're asking everybody. You need to find somebody that is, one, gonna be prepared to listen without judgment, which I'm sure 99% of therapists will do. But then it's not just enter this generic process and this tick box exercise of question after question. You need someone who's just got a bit more awareness, who can even create questions and adapt in the moment. And that's I would like to just, I suppose that's the icing on top of your cake, Ed, in terms of the advice around therapy. And like I said, I wouldn't want to say too much over it because of a negative bias.
Would you go? Would you try it again, do you think? Not.
Well, it was couples therapy, so I wouldn't try. I believe your approach is very positive, and what I mean by that is, over the last 2-3 weeks, I have actually approached somebody about sourcing the right person, because I really like the idea of a yearly check-in where I sat in a place where I believe the majority of it is just mental chatter, and I understand and I can recognize and I can acknowledge the thoughts, and I choose not to respond to certain things that I hear. But there are times where I would like to offload and potentially gain some insight from someone else and say, hey, look, I'm currently having these conversations. What do you think that might mean? Do you have any experience of this? And again, it goes back to finding the right person. It goes back to finding the right person. You might have to speak to you have to speak to 3, 4, 5 3, 4, 5 frogs before you find the right therapist. I would, this is not my own idea. I heard this a couple of years ago. I really like the idea of partnering with a coach and a therapist, because my understanding is that therapy, you look back, and but then coaching is very much around vision for the future, forward thinking, solution driven, a bit more potentially accountability, which and correct me, please correct me at any point if I'm wrong.
It depends what therapy. If you're kind of working with somebody on a person-centered basis, it can be very client-led, and it can take be paced over quite a period of time. But I actually agree with you. I integrate a lot of goal-focused sessions, because I think we have to learn how to balance the past, the present, and be able to have a vision for the future. So yeah, I agree.
And another place where I'm coming from, again, the words I use are very much observations of either my own experience or listening to somebody else, right? And this one that comes up for me in a handful of times over the last couple of years is where, when people reach out to us, they've explored the whole therapy piece. They went to the GP, they've engaged a therapist, and they say, hey, it was good, but it's not enough. I listen to you and how you potentially view the world. That makes more sense to me. And this is what I'm saying about this partnership instead. So I'm not saying don't go see a therapist. I'm saying find the right therapist, and also find a mentor and coach that has previously been through what you've been through. Because that was a thing for me as well, is that from what I understood, my experience of the couples therapist, hey, you're trying to coach me through a separation divorce here. You haven't been through a separation divorce. You can shove all the theory at me that you want, but emotionally, you can't, or you are not displaying a form of empathy or emotional understanding of what we're going through here. So it's about this partnership, if that makes.
I think the positive outcomes come from the positive therapeutic relationship that you build within, or therapeutic alliance that you have between the client and yourself. But it's really important what you're saying, Mark, about that negative experience, because that really does impact whether somebody will engage with therapy again. And I've worked a lot with sort of 21, 22, 23-year-old students at university whose mental health is in a crisis, and they will say they will come eventually to see you, but they will talk about their negative experiences all the way from being 12 at school, counselling, and they'll just say, every experience I've had with counselling has been really bad. So I think it's a really valid point that you're bringing, because it's sad, but I think it is about the uniqueness of that relationship, that you need to really trust somebody with your difficulties, if that makes your feelings. There's a vulnerability that there's a vulnerability straight away.
Absolutely spot on, and this is very much in line with the whole GP thing as well, because I liked what Ed was said about how for us that this is the whole idea of, this is not about being downstream and pulling people out of the water. This is the whole, we're going upstream and wondering why people are falling into the water. This is what the whole prevention thing is, right?
Yeah. And
my experience of working with a GP is, well, it's very much pulling the people out of the water with the medication, right? Not always. And I think that is another reason potentially why people find it so hard to open up about their mental health to a GP, because again, really want to avoid generalizing here. I would say more often than not, they're going to be hit with a form of medication. My sister went through some depression. There's some medication. It's like, hey, there's a better conversation to be had here. There is a case of, let's, like I said, go upstream and find why you're falling into it, because I find that it's cyclical. It's that they go and see a GP, maybe go and see a therapist, they feel good, then it all happens again, without really digging into the behaviors or understanding the relationship. This is very complex, of course, but I'm giving.
No, Mark, it's very topical because there is a massive, I mean, I've noticed in the NHS this prevention versus, the cure. And I think the NHS is, again, massive topic. They don't have the resources, the time to be more preventative. They don't necessarily have the skills. So the whole of the NHS is set up around treatment of an illness once it's already been diagnosed, whereas they are now moving, and I can recognize this, more into the prevention space. So I would love to see that things like forest bathing and cold water and saunas and more exercise-based schooling and playfulness and all these very good preventative things that humans need are introduced into society. And I'm really hopeful in the next 5, 10, 20 years that we change our model of how we treat human beings and how we adapt preventative wellness measures. And I think schools are getting this. This is why kids are coming to you, Emma, and wandering around beautiful and seeing scientific therapists within nature, because it's a change in how schools are treating their young people, which can only be a positive thing from where we were.
Very much.
I think that sometimes if we've been in a really low space or we've been anxious for a really long time, our brain gets used to that. It gets used to that pattern. We're not looking up at anything. We're just looking down. And sometimes the medication is actually needed just to kind of like reset our brain. That the neuroscience and working alongside a therapist is where that is really important. You're kind of working in that collaborative approach. Okay. But sometimes people don't need the medication. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you. But this is the reprogramming of the brain. Massive subject in terms of, again, it's specialized skills. It's people that understand NLP, CBT, neuroplasticity and everything else that are trained and understanding how the brain you are your thoughts. And there are books you can read on this and et cetera. So we should probably have another conversation about this in itself. It's such a massive topic because obviously there are some people, and this is why you should go to the GP, get a professional opinion. There are some people that do need serious intervention and serious clinical psychiatric support. And we're not here to advise people not to seek out trained support. We're not here to recommend any route, but explore them all. And that's the best advice I think we can give. Yeah.
And I think just going back to your thoughts, Mark, if we're all, because we're so driven, our thoughts are always like racing, that's kind of where we are at the moment. Not, it's a very gentle, children come to me all the time, this friend doesn't like me, I'm not good at this. I think if we have a very critical, this is perhaps generalization, we can be very critical to ourselves. And that is as damaging as somebody saying that to us. So we need to really learn the art of kinder thoughts, compassion. And this is all about, like, people come and they almost want a fix in therapy sometimes, like, can you fix me? Can you fix my child? And actually this it takes a lot of self-responsibility to do this.
But this is a great this is a great, I'm conscious of time, it's a great conduit to summing up. And I think what I'd like to do is leave people with some tips and tricks, some helpful skills around managing disruptive emotions in themselves, but maybe their children. And I think that would be really useful to get some views from you in terms of your experience of dealing with young people. Is there anything you can offer up? What would be, for example, your top 3 to 5 tips with dealing with children who are struggling? And again, I'm not looking for massive prescriptive advice. This is generalizations that may be helpful for parents and themselves, right? We're all kids ultimately. Can I throw that at you? Is that fair enough?
Thanks for that. I'll catch it.
Just things that you believe are useful.
So I talked about regulation. It's a really important one. If we don't know how to regulate ourselves as adults, then we can't help to regulate our children. So children are conditioned at the moment to sit in a classroom. They're not allowed to fidget. They're not allowed to get up and down. They behave. They misbehave. So this is about, first of all, is the child having enough what I call sensory breaks for their needs to be able to learn? So if they're not having the right sensory breaks throughout their day at school, they're probably going to come out of school. They will have masked everything, held everything together. They're probably going to come out and sort of have I'm going to say a meltdown or a tantrum, they're going to get cross, they're going to, you know, whatever it might be. So I think, first of all, if a child is coming out of school, if you've got a child, whether that's, you know, a young boy or and I've seen about 10 boys this week with this presentation who are coming out and are getting really angry at home, punching, kicking, breaking things, but they're actually okay at school. Then something isn't right in that regulation for that child in the school environment. They really need to go and speak to the teacher about sensory breaks. And sensory breaks are things like maybe go outside for a 5-minute run before you sit down to do maths. Therapy putty is amazing for children. It's kind of something they can you know, focus in on without and process information. So I'd say sensory breaks. I would say a really calm environment at home. When that child comes back from school, a really kind of calm routine, music on, having nature programs on the TV, because if you can't go outside for a walk, you know, the benefits of actually watching a nature program is it uplifts mood. So a positive environment. I'd say children need to learn, because of COVID, especially, there's been, in certain age of children, they didn't have where they would be learning language and socialization. They've not had that. Their neuroscience hasn't sort of been able to adapt to that. So I would say, it's gone out of my mind now what I was going to say. So hold on, it's gone completely out of my mind.
While you're thinking about it, so, you know, I love what you're saying, because it's very much around or similar to somatic work, the way we would coach men, right? Movement, breath, sound, right? Feel your body, really gain a sense of your body, playfulness, expression through movements, which is wonderful.
Just and technology is a real thing. Children are, since COVID, there's a group of children that I work with who are about 10 or 11 who are addicted to Xboxing. Technology. It causes a huge cortisol rush. They get addicted. They can start, the addictive cycle of behaviors can start through the gaming. And I would say, please limit your technology time. And that's just not just children, like adults, we need to like lead the way with that as well. So balance. Think about the 3 parts to your brain: the driver, the soothing brain, and this adrenaline that we get. So increasing your soothing brains as much as you can, and we can take responsibility for that, you know.
They're all really helpful, and again, I can see a lot of connection to adult behaviors and skills there. And as Mark mentioned, a lot of it is what we're trying to talk to people about is being in nature. It's moving your body, it's being playful, it's sensory, it's calming the nervous system. It's an environment that you put yourself in, removing yourself from cortisol situations and naturally cooling the body down via breath, etc. And you know, cortisol causes inflammation, which causes disease. So bad inflammation does. So I think it's the same. You know, it's the same advice we should give ourselves, and then practice that with your children. And it's the environment you're creating for your children that will nurture them into being, you know, hopefully decent human beings and emotionally balanced human beings. So great. Any last throw-ins from your own parenting experience with 2 boys? Breaking habits and cycles for men?
I'd say all feelings are normal. We have to, if you've got a young child that is presenting with any feeling, and I'm saying anger because that's quite a normal feeling that young children can present with, and adults, we need to know how to hold it. As an adult, you need to know how to hold it. And we're not very good in society at holding anger. It's seen as a really negative emotion. So I think if we can learn to sit with it, calm the environment down. Young children, if they're tantruming about 4, if you can hold them and let them kick out and just let them get it out of their system. We need to learn how to hold our emotions so we can hold our children's emotions.
Brilliant advice. Someone 2 days ago advised me, if you're dealing with someone who's emotional, ask them to sit down. It's a totally different dynamic than standing up talking to someone. Standing up talking to someone who's emotional is a threat. But the moment you sit them down, the entire situation changes. I thought that was brilliant.
Slow down your voice, But let's be honest, it's okay if you kind of get cross with your children occasionally, because we're human beings, but actually every day is a new day. So don't let it snowball into the next day. Don't hold the grudges. Don't make the child feel like, that they've got to be good for what happened yesterday. Really end the day and say tomorrow's a new day.
And ideally don't go to sleep on an argument.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Great. Mark, anything you'd like to add before I close off?
Emma, brilliant first conversation. We should do it again. Ed, thank you very much for setting up. Lovely to meet you.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys.
Brilliant. Thank you, Emma. Lovely conversation. Learned a lot there. Really insightful. Let's have another chat about some of the issues, and wish you well with your practice. People can contact you. We'll put the details in the YouTube link. Please reach out to Emma. Get some advice. If you're in Dorset, go and get some counselling maybe, and follow her on Instagram. So thank you, Emma. Thank you, Mark.
All Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this Blue Mind conversation. We hope you've enjoyed the content, and ask a small favour that you like and share the page. The bigger the page, the more interesting the guest should be, and the more content we can put out. If you are interested in talking to Mark and myself about any of the topics covered, coaching, speaking, or any other collaboration, please drop Mark or I an email at ed@Blue Mind Approach or mark@Blue Mind Approach, or contact us on our social media channels. Thank you for listening. Take care.